I don't usually talk about this part of my life. Not with my friends over wine, not even with my therapist. Especially not with my husband, Alan, though we still share a bed every night like nothing ever happened. But something did happen. And it didn't just unfold in a single reckless moment, as so many think affairs do. It was slow, slippery, like stepping into a warm bath you didn't realize was too deep until it swallowed you whole. It started the summer I turned 53. Alan and I had just come back from a trip to Italy, something we talked about for years, but never got around to until we were practically empty nesters. Our daughter, Emma, had moved to Chicago, chasing her career and her independence with a kind of stubborn confidence I both admired and feared. That left just the two of us rattling around in the same suburban house we'd lived in for over 25 years, surrounded by photos of birthday parties and family vacations, and a silence that seemed to grow louder each day. Italy was supposed to reignite something. We walked cobblestone streets hand in hand, sipped espresso in quiet piazzas, and made love once, awkwardly, in a too-small hotel bed that creaked with every shift. I faked an orgasm because I wanted it to feel like how it used to. It didn't. By the time we returned home, the warmth of the trip had already begun to fade, like the tan lines on my shoulders. I settled back into the rhythm of my routine, morning walks, teaching part-time at the community college, tending my garden. Alan buried himself in work as he always did. We moved around each other like ghosts with shared mortgage payments. Then came the email. It was from Nancy, my father's third wife, and to be perfectly honest, the only one of his wives I ever tolerated. She was warm and unpretentious, someone who laughed with her whole body and drank Chardonnay like it was water. I hadn't seen her in nearly a decade, not since Dad's funeral. We'd lost touch the way people do when they aren't blood, and when there's no one left tethering them together. "Your stepbrother is in town," she wrote. "He's doing some consulting work in DC. I thought it might be nice for you two to reconnect." My first thought was, what stepbrother? Then I remembered Liam. Liam wasn't technically my stepbrother for very long. Dad married Nancy when I was already in college, and Liam was a senior in high school at the time. He lived with them during holidays and the occasional summer break, and though we only crossed paths a few times, I remembered him well. He was tall, lean, with the kind of confidence that came naturally to boys who knew they were handsome. But there was something else about him back then, something harder to place. He didn't talk much, but when he did, his words carried weight. I remember once catching him staring at me across the kitchen, a look that made my stomach tighten. Not in fear, but in something dangerously close to curiosity. We never spoke about it. He was 17. I was 20. And then life moved on as it does. Now here he was in town, 2 decades and a half later. I should have deleted the email. Instead, I replied, "Sure. Give him my number." A few days later, I received a text. "Hey, it's Liam, your long-lost stepbrother. Drinks?" We met at a bar near DuPont Circle. The kind with low lighting and overpriced cocktails. I wore a black blouse with a deep V that I hadn't worn in years. I told myself it was because the weather was warm, not because I wanted to see if he'd notice. He did. He stood as I walked in, taller than I remembered, his features sharper with age, but still devastatingly attractive. His hair was more salt than pepper now, and the scruff on his jawline suited him. "Claire," he said, pulling me into a hug that lingered just a beat too long. "You look incredible." "So do you," I replied, maybe too quickly. "God, it's been, what? 25 years. "More like 30, he said with a grin. "But who's counting?" The conversation flowed easily, surprisingly so. We talked about our lives, our work. He was divorced, no kids, consulting for tech firms. I told him about Alan, about Emma, about my garden and my classes, and how quiet the house had become. There was something in the way he looked at me, attentive, amused, and somehow interested. I felt seen in a way I hadn't felt in years. Alan listened, sure, but Liam watched. His gaze lingered on my hands, my lips, the curve of my neck when I tilted my head to laugh. By the third drink, I felt warm, buzzed, but not drunk, more like alive. He touched my wrist once as he leaned in to tell a joke. It was innocent. It wasn't. When we said goodbye, he kissed my cheek, slow and deliberate. His lips brushed closer to the corner of my mouth than they needed to. You know, he said, his voice low, if we weren't something, this would feel a lot like a date. I swallowed. Well, we're not really related, I said before I could stop myself. He smiled, then turned and walked away. I barely slept that night. My body was buzzing in ways it hadn't in years. I kept replaying the look in his eyes, the weight of his hand on my skin, the way my heart had quickened when he leaned in. The next day, I texted him. Still in town? He replied almost instantly. Come over. I hesitated. For hours. My fingers hovered over the screen as I paced the kitchen. Alan was at the office as always. The house was quiet. Too quiet. I got in my car and drove across town. Liam's rental was a sleek, modern loft, minimalist, masculine. He poured me a glass of wine, red this time, and asked how I was feeling. Nervous, I admitted. Don't be, he said. We're just catching up. But the way he said it, I knew we weren't. He sat beside me on the sofa, closer this time. His thigh brushed mine. He looked at me, not speaking, just waiting. I kissed him. I don't know who moved first. Maybe it was mutual. Maybe I wanted it too much. Maybe I was tired of feeling like a ghost in my own life. His lips were warm, insistent, tasting of wine and something darker. His hands found my waist, my hips, sliding under the hem of my blouse. My breath hitched. I should have stopped it. I didn't. Clothes fell away. Slowly at first, then all at once. He took his time with me, like he was learning my body piece by piece, as if I were something valuable, something he'd been waiting to unwrap for years. I moaned into his mouth when he slipped inside me, my nails digging into his back. He moved with a patience I hadn't known in so long, watching me the whole time like he wanted to memorize my face. I came hard, gasping his name. He followed not long after, groaning against my neck, and I clung to him like I was drowning. After, we lay in silence, bodies tangled in sweat-damp sheets. I should have felt guilt. I didn't. I felt awake. Alive. Like I'd been sleepwalking for years and had just now opened my eyes. He traced circles on my bare back. You okay? I nodded. More than okay. We didn't speak of consequences. Not then. Not yet. But deep down, I knew this wasn't going to be a one-time thing. Not by a long shot. The days that followed were full of quiet, pulsing tension. I walked through my house like someone had rearranged the furniture while I slept. Everything looked the same. The muted tones of the living room, the familiar creak of the stairs, Alan's favorite chair with the worn arms. But something in me had shifted. I saw the world through a different filter now, one that made ordinary things feel suddenly hollow. Alan didn't notice. He asked me how my day had been over dinner, commented on the news, kissed my cheek before bed. I nodded, answered politely, smiled at the right moments. But inside, I was replaying everything that had happened in Liam's loft, the weight of his body, the slow intensity of his touch, the way he'd made me feel like I mattered, like I was wanted. A few days passed before I saw Liam again. We texted short, teasing things at first, then bolder messages. Things that made my cheeks flush while I folded laundry or sat alone in my car, rereading them with trembling fingers. He told me he couldn't stop thinking about the way I tasted, about the sounds I made, about the way I looked at him afterward, like I wasn't ashamed. Because I wasn't. Not then. We met again the following Thursday. I told Alan I was meeting an old colleague for coffee. And the lie came out easier than I expected. Too easy. Liam opened the door in jeans and a black t-shirt, barefoot, holding a glass of whiskey. The smell of him hit me instantly. Cedar, smoke, something male and addictive. He didn't say a word, just pulled me inside and kissed me like he'd been starving. We didn't make it to the bedroom. He bent me over the kitchen island, pulled my skirt up, and slid into me from behind, one hand gripping my hip, the other in my hair. I moaned shamelessly, loud and raw, my hands bracing against the cool marble as I rocked back into him. God, Claire, he growled against my ear. You're even better than I remember. I came hard, gasping his name, shaking from the force of it. He followed not long after, biting my shoulder as he spilled inside me. Afterward, he handed me a towel and a glass of wine like it was the most natural thing in the world. We talked, but not like before. There was an edge to our conversation now, charged with something deeper. He asked about Alan, and I found myself telling him things I hadn't even admitted to myself. He's not a bad man, I said, curled against Liam's bare chest on the couch. But somewhere along the way, we just stopped being lovers. We're roommates with shared memories. Liam ran his fingers through my hair, thoughtful. Do you miss who you used to be? He asked. I turned my face into his neck, breathing him in. I think I miss being seen, being wanted, being touched. He kissed the top of my head. You deserve all of that, and more. I should have felt ashamed. I should have told him to stop, to end it before it got worse. But I didn't. I stayed. I let myself melt into his arms, into his body, into the version of myself I hadn't felt in decades. We started seeing each other once, sometimes twice a week. Always during the day. Always at his place. I'd lie to Alan, sometimes elaborately, sometimes lazily, and each time, it chipped away at something I'd once valued. But what replaced it was intoxicating. Liam made me feel younger, but not in a cliché, midlife crisis way. He didn't treat me like I was trying to recapture my youth. He treated me like a woman who still had desires, still had power. When we fucked, it wasn't gentle or sweet, it was primal, consuming. He'd pin my hands above my head, hold me down, make me beg. And I loved it. I needed it. There were moments, though, when the guilt would sneak in, soft, quiet moments. Like when Alan reached for my hand during a movie, or when I found one of Emma's childhood drawings tucked in a drawer. I'd feel a pang then, a little crack in the armor I'd built around myself. But the cracks didn't stop me. One afternoon, as I lay sprawled across Liam's bed, slick with sweat and trembling from another orgasm he'd coaxed from me with maddening patience, he lit a cigarette, the first I'd seen him smoke, and asked, "What are we doing, Claire?" I didn't answer right away. He took a drag, then looked at me with something raw in his eyes. I'm not asking for promises, but I need to know if this is just a distraction, or if it's something more. I sat up, pulling the sheet around me. I don't know, I whispered. I wish I did. He nodded, as if he'd expected that answer. But something in him pulled away after that, just slightly, like he was guarding himself. I should have left then. Should have ended it before the fantasy collapsed under the weight of reality. But I didn't, because I wasn't ready to go back to sleep. One morning, I came home after spending the night at a hotel with Liam, our first overnight. Alan was in the kitchen making coffee, still in his robe. "You're up early," I said, my voice too bright.
He smiled at me.
Didn't sleep much. Weird dreams. I kissed his cheek, and he squeezed my hand. I missed you last night. Something in my stomach flipped. I told you, Susan's birthday dinner ran late. I just crashed at her place. He nodded. Right. But there was something in his eyes, a flicker of something unreadable. Later that day, I found my favorite earrings missing. Tiny gold hoops Liam had unfastened the night before, placing them delicately on the bedside table. I texted him, and he told me they were still there. "Come get them," he wrote. Or, "Let me bring them to you." My heart leapt at the suggestion, and then dropped. We couldn't meet at my house. Alan was working from home more often now, his office schedule shifting as his firm adjusted post-pandemic. The risk was too high. I told Liam I'd come by the next day. But something had changed. He wasn't as warm in his texts. More clipped. More distant. The next time we met, the sex was still intense, if anything, rougher, but there was a tension between us that hadn't been there before. I asked if he was okay, and he brushed it off. "I just don't want to be your secret forever," he said. "You knew what this was." I snapped, more sharply than I intended. "You knew I was married." He flinched. "So that's it? I'm your midlife fantasy? A break from boredom?"
No, iwis parat.
"It's not like that. You're not just God, Liam. You make me feel alive." Then leave him. The words landed like a slap.
I can't, I said.
Not yet. He nodded, jaw tight, and stood to get dressed. That was the first time I cried in his bed. He didn't comfort me, and I didn't stop going back. Because despite the tension, despite the cracks forming between us, what we had was still the most real thing I'd felt in years. Even if it was borrowed time. Even if it had to end. And yet, something in me wasn't ready to let go. Not yet. Time doesn't stop when you're having an affair. It doesn't slow down or pause to let you catch your breath. It races forward, daring you to keep up, daring you to outrun the consequences. By early spring, Liam and I had settled into a strange rhythm. We didn't talk about the future anymore. We didn't even talk much at all. Our conversations had narrowed, not into silence exactly, but into something leaner, more practical. When can I see you? Can you get away Thursday? I miss your mouth. The tension from our last fight hadn't fully left us, but we'd both pretended it had. We needed the illusion that our little world was untouched by the one outside. But I could feel it fraying. Alan had grown more attentive lately. Not in a suspicious way. That would have been easier. No, it was worse than that. He'd become kind again. Thoughtful. Like the man I used to lie awake missing in our first silent years. He started cooking with me in the evenings, offering foot rubs while we watched television. One morning, he left a single daffodil on my pillow before he left for work. I stared at that flower for 10 minutes, then cried in the shower until my eyes burned. I should have ended it. Should have told Liam we'd gone too far, that I couldn't keep hurting people who didn't deserve it. But the truth was more complicated. It wasn't just lust anymore. It hadn't been for a while. What we had, Liam and I, had become its own kind of bond. Illicit, yes.
Twisted even.
But deeply, painfully real. One afternoon, I arrived at Liam's place with a bottle of red wine and a trench coat over black lace lingerie. Something bold. Something reckless. He didn't kiss me right away. Just stood in the doorway, arms crossed, watching me. "You're late," he said. "Traffic." He stepped aside, letting me in. "Don't lie to me, Claire. You weren't sure you were coming." I swallowed, my pulse suddenly in my throat. "That's not true." He turned to face me, eyes unreadable. "You hesitated. I can feel it. Every time we do this now, there's this pause. Like you're waiting for a reason not to." I stepped closer, placing my hand on his chest. "I'm here. That should be enough." "It used to be," he said quietly. I kissed him then, hard, trying to push the doubt away. He responded, finally, but something about it felt different. Urgent, not hungry. Like he was trying to prove something. We undressed in the hallway, stumbling against walls, gasping between kisses. He bent me over the arm of the couch and pulled my panties aside, thrusting into me with a force that bordered on anger. I moaned, clawing at the cushions, needing him to chase the guilt away. But afterward, as I lay on the floor beside him, still catching my breath, he asked the question I'd been dreading. "Do you love me?" It was a whisper, almost a dare. I turned my head slowly to look at him. His expression wasn't needy, it was raw, honest in a way that undid me. "I don't know what I feel anymore," I said. "Everything's so tangled. Sometimes I think I do. Other times I just feel lost." He nodded, like that answer didn't surprise him. Then he got up, walked to the kitchen, and poured himself a drink without offering me one. We didn't speak for a week after that. That silence was worse than anything. I went through the motions at home like a woman in mourning, smiling when I had to, avoiding mirrors, avoiding Alan's eyes. Then one Friday night, Alan surprised me. We were cleaning up after dinner, something quiet, just the two of us, when he touched my arm gently. "I booked us a weekend away," he said. I blinked at him. "You what?" "Just a little cabin by the lake. 2 nights. No phones, no distractions. Just us." I thought maybe we could reconnect. My stomach dropped. I should have felt touched, grateful. But all I felt was panic. "That's sweet of you," I said. "But I have work Monday. I'm not sure I can get away." He gave me a soft smile. "I already spoke to your assistant. She said your calendar was clear." Of course he had. I agreed because what else could I do? But all night, I tossed and turned beside him, my thoughts a cyclone. I didn't text Liam about the trip. I didn't text him at all. He didn't reach out either. The silence between us stretched, taut, fragile, dangerous. The cabin was lovely,
Quaint.
remote. The kind of place I used to fantasize about when I was younger, newly married, before kids and careers pulled us into different worlds. Alan was doing everything right, making me coffee in the mornings, starting a fire each night, rubbing my feet like he used to back when I wore heels daily. I should have leaned into it, but I couldn't stop thinking about Liam. The feel of his skin, the bite of his voice in bed, the way he looked at me like I was still whole. Saturday night, Alan brought out a bottle of wine and lit candles. We talked for the first time in months, really talked. About Emma. About the silence that had crept between us like ivy. Then he kissed me. And for a moment, I let myself go. Let myself pretend that maybe this was enough. But as his hand slid up my thigh, all I could think about was Liam's mouth there instead. His fingers. His voice. I pulled away. Alan searched my face. Claire? Did I do something wrong? No, I whispered, blinking back tears. I'm just tired.
I'm sorry.
He nodded, but his eyes were wounded. That night, I crept into the bathroom and locked the door. My phone was in my robe pocket, and I stared at Liam's name for a long time before I typed. I miss you. I think I'm in love with you.
I'm scared.
I stared at the message, trembling. Then hit send. Nothing came back. I waited. 10 minutes. 30. An hour. Still nothing. At 2 a.m., I lay awake, eyes open in the dark, Alan's breath slow beside me. My heart was thudding so loud I could hear it in my ears. When we returned home, Alan was quiet. Not cold, just subdued. As if he felt something had slipped away, but couldn't name it yet. That Monday, Liam finally texted. I need space. This is starting to hurt too much.
I'm sorry, Claire.
No call.
No explanation. Just that.
I sat in my car in the grocery store parking lot and stared at the screen until the world blurred. My ears were ringing. My hands were ice. I thought about never seeing him again. Never feeling him again. Never tasting that reckless, dangerous freedom we'd built. And something inside me shattered. I called him once, then twice. Straight to voicemail. I didn't know what I'd say if he picked up. Only that silence was unbearable. That night, I climbed into bed beside my husband and stared at the ceiling for hours. Alan turned to me in his sleep and reached for my hand. I let him take it, but my heart was still in another bed, with a man I'd betrayed everything for, and lost anyway. I didn't hear from Liam for almost 2 months. It was like a limb had been severed, but instead of bleeding, I just went numb. Life went on because it had to. Work, grocery runs, dinner with Alan, Emma's video calls from the city. I smiled when I needed to, laughed when it was expected. But inside, I was hollowed out, walking through my days like a woman buried in wet cotton. The worst part was that no one noticed. No one said, "You seem different," or "Are you okay?" Not even Alan, who'd started going quiet again, though now it was a different kind of silence. Not comfortable, but cautious. The kind that fills a room after something is broken and no one knows whether to sweep the shards or pretend they were never there. He hadn't asked again about that weekend at the lake. He didn't need to. We both knew something had shifted. I wanted to hate Liam for vanishing, but I couldn't. Deep down, I understood. He hadn't signed up for this kind of mess. He'd fallen in love with a version of me that only existed in stolen hours and tangled sheets, a woman I didn't even recognize when I looked in the mirror anymore. But then, one Saturday morning in late May, I saw him again. It was at my father's birthday gathering, a quiet lunch at a French bistro, just family. Liam walked in late, hair slightly damp from rain, wearing a dark shirt that clung to him in a way that made my stomach drop. He looked thinner, older, tired. He smiled when he saw me, but it didn't reach his eyes. My heart thudded so loudly, I thought someone would notice. No one did. He hugged our father, then made his way around the table, polite and warm with everyone. When he finally reached me, his hand brushed mine just briefly, and I felt heat shoot through me like electricity. "Claire," he said softly. "Just my name. Nothing else." I nodded. My voice caught somewhere behind my ribs.
E.
We didn't sit next to each other, thank God. He was 3 seats down, but I could feel his presence like a second heartbeat. Every forkful of food, every sip of wine, was a performance. And when someone brought up Emma and her recent promotion, I laughed a little too loudly, a little too brightly, trying to prove how stable and maternal I was. After dessert, I stepped outside to breathe. The rain had stopped, leaving the air thick and sweet with summer. I leaned against the wall and closed my eyes. And then he was there. I didn't hear him approach, but I knew it was him before he spoke. "You look beautiful," he said quietly. I turned to him. "Don't." I had to say it. I meant don't do this. Not here. He nodded, rubbing the back of his neck. "You're right." We stood in silence for a moment. "I didn't know how to walk away," he said finally. "I didn't want to. But it was destroying me. Wanting you, knowing I couldn't really have you." "You had me," I said. "More than anyone ever has." He looked at me then, and something in his face cracked. "Did I?" I nodded. "I'm still not sure how to live with that." He stepped closer, and for a moment I thought he was going to touch me, but he didn't. "I haven't stopped thinking about you," he said. "Not for a single day." My eyes filled before I could stop them. I turned away, embarrassed, but he gently reached out and tucked a strand of hair behind my ear. "I just needed to see you one last time," he said, "to know if it was real, or if I made it up." "It was real," I whispered. "God help us both, it was real." Then, quietly, he leaned in and kissed me on the cheek. Just once. Chaste but lingering. And then he walked away. I didn't move for a long time. That night, Alan and I had dinner in near silence. I wanted to tell him everything. I wanted to scream, cry, confess, run. But instead, I poured us both a glass of wine and asked about his day. Because it was easier. The days that followed were oddly clear. Something inside me had shifted again, but not in the way I expected. I started going for walks in the early mornings, before the neighborhood stirred. I sat in the garden more, letting the dirt get under my fingernails. I booked a massage. Took myself to lunch. Canceled a few meetings just because I could. And then, one evening, I sat Alan down on the porch and told him the truth. Not everything, not Liam's name, not the timeline,
Not the depth.
but enough. I told him I had been unfaithful, that I had lost myself, that it wasn't about him, not really, but that I didn't know how to find my way back without hurting us both. He didn't say a word for a long time, just looked at me, not angry, not shocked, just profoundly tired. When he finally spoke, it was barely above a whisper. "Do you love him?" I shook my head. "I don't know anymore. Maybe. Maybe I just loved who I was with him. That somehow hurt him more. I always thought," he said, "that we'd grow old together. Even if we drifted. Even if it wasn't perfect." I reached for his hand. He didn't pull away.
We still can, I said.
"But it has to be honest. It has to be real." We sat there until the sun set. Two people who had built a life, cracked it open, and were now sitting among the pieces, wondering which ones still fit. Weeks passed. Liam didn't reach out again, and I didn't look for him. I think we both understood that what we had couldn't live in the real world. It was too fragile, too fierce. It was a match struck in the dark, beautiful, fleeting, and always destined to burn out. Alan and I started therapy. Slowly, awkwardly. We began to talk about the things we'd buried over the years, the silences, the small betrayals, the disappointments neither of us dared name until it was almost too late. Sometimes I still think about Liam, about the curve of his back, when he slept, the way he looked at me like I was still worth wanting. And sometimes, I wonder what would have happened if I'd left. If I'd chosen chaos over comfort, heat over home. But mostly I just breathe. I take one day at a time. Because that's what love is in the end. Not fireworks. Not forbidden passion. Not even the thrill of being wanted after years of being seen, but not touched. It's the choice you make every day to stay, to show up, to rebuild what's been broken with your bare hands. And I'm still making that choice.
For now.